Variety of segments that are going to be dealing with the efforts of the employees of the University of Iowa Hospital and Clinics to organize a bargaining unit of the Service Employees International Union, SEIU. My name is Gary Sanders, and tonight I'm very happy to have with me as my guest Marty Levitt, who is the author of Confessions of a Union Buster. Marty, welcome to Iowa.
Thanks, Gary. I appreciate being here.
Marty, what brings you here to Iowa? This is the beginning of June, and what exactly are you doing here? I mean, this is a great book and everything, but what are you doing here?
I was invited to come to Iowa City by the Service Employees International Union when they discovered that the hospital that the union is in the process of organizing had hired labor relations consultants that I used to compete with. And in effect, these labor relations consultants are blatant union busters. And they have brought a reign of terror into the hospital in their effort to destroy the organizing effort. So my role in visiting here is to bring to light and out into the open exactly what this union busting firm called Management Science Associates is doing.
Mm-hmm. Now, you said you had a career where you were doing somewhat similar activities.
I spent 20 years of my life, from 1969 to 1988, busting unions in organizing efforts throughout the United States.
Mm-hmm. And it's kind of unbelievable that here you are in 1998, you were brought here by SEIU to expose people who are doing exactly what you had been doing.
That's right, who are committing the same kind of corporate terrorism and destruction that I reaped upon working people for 2 decades.
Now, Marty, you said terrorism, and that's a little strong language, especially here in Iowa, where things maybe are a little calmer than the places where you work, don't you think?
It may be strong language, but in terms of how union busters operate, it's not strong enough. When people like Management Science or people like I used to be are hired by an employer for the purpose of destroying the collective spirit of people and their right to organize, they'll go to any length to destroy that effort, and any length includes acts of what I refer to as terrorism.
Mm-hmm. I mean, you really think that, you mentioned some things in your book here where you would find out things about employees from their past and use that against them. Do you really think that here in Iowa City, this group MSA is going to use those kind of incredibly nasty, underhanded tactics? Aren't we above all that here in Iowa?
The people in Iowa may be, but the people in Management Science Associates are not. Mm-hmm. And they cannot be successful if they do not use these dirty, filthy, divisive tactics.
Mm-hmm. Do you know any of these people at MSA personally?
I do not know them personally. I know their chairman of the board through competing with him, but he is not on site in this campaign. Mm-hmm. But I certainly know the techniques that they employ, because many of them are out-and-out duplicates of what I did.
Mm-hmm. Do you want to tell me, maybe to lead some credence to what you're saying here, could you discuss in some detail and specificity any campaign that you ran in a hospital to try to bust a union?
During the 1970s, the vast majority of my campaigns were in healthcare facilities. Some of the more memorable ones were the Henry Ford Hospital in Detroit, Michigan, the Harper Grace Hospital in Detroit, Michigan, major hospitals in Boston,
well, let's say you got hired by one of these hospitals, okay? What exactly would you do? How would they get in touch with you, and what would your activities consist of?
Well, they usually got in touch with us because they heard about us from another successful union busting effort, or perhaps they discovered us through seminars that we used to do throughout the country under the guise of the American Hospital Association. That illustrated that there was a way to prevent and destroy union organizing efforts. And because there is not an employer in any industry, including healthcare, that does not have as a motive for union destruction their obsession for control, it was not difficult to secure the client. But when we were hired in, we brought a ruse along with us. And the ruse was that we were going to use the perceived threat of a union and a union organizing effort to force the company to clean up its act, to sensitize supervisors and management, to improve the quality of work life, in effect, to create a kinder and gentler company.
By the way, were these hospitals public sector just as UIHC is, or were these private sector?
They were both.
Okay.
They were both.
Okay, so your experience is relevant to a public sector hospital.
Yeah, most definitely.
Okay. So you would be brought in and you would begin a campaign of what we might call disinformation about unions?
Disinformation, manipulation, illusion, terror, and fear.
Did you ever work in a hospital in a college community like we have here, where we're supposedly a little more educated and liberal in our thinking?
I certainly did, but when it comes to being educated, most people, whether they are educators, whether they are workers, whether they are employers, have very little education, knowledge, or background in labor relations, in unions, and in collective bargaining. And that gave us our advantage, because when we brought our bags full of tricks and misinformation, we were usually the first disseminators of the education in the form of misinformation and distortion.
So the fact that this is a college town and this is Iowa, you don't think those are any kind of factors that would lend itself to maybe having management science have a different sort of campaign than what you're used to doing?
No, the fundamental techniques, which are techniques, as I've said before, of destruction and terror, they have no geographical preference. They have to be utilized for the terrorists, very frankly, to be successful.
Okay. Now, I mean, I have to tell you, the word terrorist kind of turns me off, and I have a feeling that it turns off a lot of people who might be watching who are sort of neutral about this. Obviously the people who are pro-union think, all right, terrorism, that's right on. But what about the people who are neutral? Don't you think that's a bit of a hyperbole?
Well, I could change terrorist to hired gun, to hitman.
Well, those are all pretty loaded. Why don't you just tell me, what would you be doing if you were the head of this MSA effort? I mean, instead of just calling it terrorism in a generality, in any kind of a specific.
I would be working behind the scenes, invisible to the working people who would be comprising the bargaining unit, and highly visible to the management and supervision of the company, or the hospital in this instance, who would be turned over to me and instructed to obey, perform, and carry out every instruction I gave them in terms of campaigning.
Now, what would be your first instruction, do you think?
My first statement to management would be that their employees have declared war on them by considering bringing in a disinterested outside third party to speak on their behalf. And we are not going to tolerate this union invasion. Therefore, we are going to over-communicate the facts to our people, and you as management are going to be the couriers of that information. We are going to educate the people so that they fully understand the pitfalls and the downside and how harmful a union can be in this kind of a work environment. And you will convey to them precisely what I tell you to convey to them.
So you would frame it in terms of educating.
That's correct.
The employees. Okay. Okay.
But we never called ourselves union busters. We never called ourselves terrorists or hitmen or hired guns. I use that reference today because the actions that we executed are the kinds of actions that would be executed by those labels.
Okay. Okay. So you're going to go into the hospital and you're going to sell yourself as an educator and try.
And a human resource specialist and a communication specialist.
And so would you bring managers into a large meeting room to discuss all this, or meet with them individually, or
I did both.
What would be the nuts and bolts of it?
I had frequent group meetings where I conveyed to the group a lot of misinformation and truth-twisted facts about unions and the harm that they would cause, both to management, to the workers, and to the work community. From those meetings, I would disseminate written information that the supervisors would become the delivery people of. And then in between those group sessions, I would bring those supervisors into one-on-one meetings with myself, where I would develop background profiles on all of their subordinates. I would give them assignments to take out to those subordinates to convey to them. I would bring them back into one-on-one meetings to get feedback on how they executed those assignments, and not give them the opportunity to say anything astray from what I was programming them to say. They became, in very short order, my hostages and my puppets.
All right. So so you're going to convey a message to the managers, and they're going to convey that message to the people who work under them.
That's right. And even if they believe the message to be untruthful, manipulative, or harmful, they come to learn quickly that they have no choice.
So the message basically is that the union would destroy the hospital, the workplace.
And the message would be that in bargaining it's futile, that there's no guarantee of improvement, that it creates an arm's length relationship between management and workers, that it takes away flexibility, that it threatens the quality of patient care. But it becomes a saturation. The campaign becomes a daily event, whether there's written communication, group meetings, or something going on.
Do you think there are any people at this hospital who honestly believe, without being indoctrinated, that a union would be a bad thing?
Oh, I'm certain there are.
What percent? Do you have any idea what percent of the possible people in the bargaining unit?
In my practice, you usually have built in 15% of any proposed bargaining unit that, for whatever their reasons, want absolutely no part of being organized.
And do you think it'd be more in a so-called right-to-work state like Iowa that possibly doesn't have a labor tradition as strong as in Michigan or in the East Coast?
No, I really don't, because I think there's such a lack of understanding of collective bargaining and unions, that where there's a disinterest, it's because there's just not an understanding and awareness.
All right, so we've got 15% who are just genuinely anti-union for whatever reason.
I think that's fair.
So you don't have to do anything with them.
That's right.
And would you say that, that these are still honest, respectable people who have these views out of their own conscience?
Oh, absolutely. We have our convictions and our feelings based on experience.
Okay.
And whatever their experience or reasons are, they're absolutely entitled to.
Okay. So then, are these the people that the 15% anti who are among the management that you would get to work with you to influence the other employees?
Well, if they were part of management, they would have no choice.
Okay,
but to work with me.
All right, so they have no choice.
In management, there's no alternative.
Okay.
And when a consultant comes in and says, this is what you are going to do and how you are going to do it, pardon me, if they do not execute it the way they're instructed, they're not doing their job.
And then you would also get other people among the 15% who are non-management people to go out and help disseminate an anti-union message.
Eventually, not in the beginning, but eventually, we would draw from that group and form what I used to call a vote no-co, or a vote no committee. And we would create the illusion that they were self-inspired. But in effect, they would be controlled by us just as management's campaign was controlled by us.
But some of these people, and I don't mean to harp on this, but some of these people are self-inspired.
They're self-inspired in terms of their conviction.
Okay.
But it would be difficult for them to start and maintain a communication campaign and also attempt to do their job at the same time unless they had some significant and ongoing assistance.
Well, certainly as this series moves along, I hope to bring on some people who are from the anti-union side to discuss how their views started and what they're doing.
Oh, most certainly.
And I would welcome that, and I know you would welcome that.
Absolutely.
This campaign you're talking about, I mean, interviews with people and being there all the time, you're not, or certainly from your past work life, did not come cheap. I read in here about your, Continental Mark 7s that you were driving and your expensive house and flying across the country. So this must come at a pretty high price to these hospitals.
Oh, union busting carries a premium price tag. And the more expensive the union buster, the more attractive he becomes to his prospective client or his client.
Well, this MSA, I mean, they're saying it's $90,000. What do you think about that?
Having looked into that, what is being said is that the hospital has budgeted $90,000 for their services. But management science, nor I, during my practicing days, would not accept a campaign of this size and magnitude for that cheap a price. With the network that exists in the healthcare industry, if previous clients found out that they sold out so cheaply, or prospective clients down the road felt that they could get that same bargain, management science wouldn't last very long.
Do you think we're ever going to find out how much the hospital is spending? And by the way, when we say the hospital, that's a publicly funded institution.
Correct.
So do we think we're ever going to find out how much I'm paying to bust a union and how much you're paying to bust a union?
I would suspect if the day were to come that an outside auditor were to investigate how the money is being maneuvered, I suspect it's being billed, the overage of the $90,000 is being billed through affiliates, DBAs, and such of management science. They have a variety of other labels that they operate under.
And, you know, we keep saying this phrase, union buster. What would you say to people who say, well, but there's no union there now, so how can they be called union busters if they're not really a union?
Well, they're forming a union, and the intent is to bust the formation. So it is busting the union that is attempting to evolve out of a collective spirit of people. It's union busting.
Now, I recognize that that's the term, but I think there's some people out there who might be watching who might be confused by saying, as I said, that since they have not voted yet, you know, they've turned in their cards and called for an election.
Correct.
Okay, and that's where it's at now, supervised by the Public Employment Relations Board in Des Moines. You know, in your career, which you said lasted 20 years, what was approximately your record, do you think? And if we could be specific, if you could, about hospitals and even break it down into public sector hospitals.
Well, in the 20 years I conducted directly just under 300 counter-organizing campaigns. I would say a third of those, or 25% of those, were in hospitals specifically, another 20% in the healthcare industry. Maybe 10% were in the public sector. But out of the 300 campaigns overall, I lost 5.
Well, I mean, that certainly is a startling figure, and don't you think that might scare potential unionists from doing this if they're up against people like you that are so expert? I mean, aren't you creating MSA as this huge boogeyman that's going to, you know, wipe out the efforts of SEIU here, and the people who are trying to organize, the employees of the hospital?
Well, early in my career, especially throughout the 1970s, union organizers and unions were not prepared well enough for the type of strategies and devices that the union busters were using. But as they saw how this method worked and started to learn from it and prepare for it, that the kind of track record that I developed could not be equaled today. The unions are too well prepared. They understand what to do. They know that the union buster cannot deal with the light of day. And the more that kind of terrorism is brought out into the open and exposed, and working people discover that what is being presented to them is really illusion, manipulation, saturation, an effort to confuse and frustrate, that creates an outrage. Nobody that works for a living wants to discover that they're being manipulated, especially by these types of characters, and that usually translates to solidarity and support for the union.
What now, if SEIU and the employees at the hospital and clinic who are trying to organize lose this campaign, what is the effect going to be on the workers at the hospital who are already members of AFSCME, American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, Local 12 in Iowa City. Is that going to have any effect at all? Or?
Oh, it most certainly will. If MSA is successful in their union busting effort, they will use as a springboard that success to attempt to weaken the existence of AFSCME in the hospital. They can't get rid of AFSCME because AFSCME is the unit in the University of Iowa Hospital cannot be decertified or eliminated unless it was a statewide decertification. Mm-hmm. But coming off a union bust, they can certainly make efforts to break or fracture and certainly weaken the effectiveness of the union within that particular hospital, and would definitely.
How would they do that?
Simply by tightening things, by making it more difficult for the union to operate within its existing contract, to use some of the same divisive and pressure and personal tactics to create conflict within the union. And the
Again, even here in Iowa, you think they would do that?
Well,
a place where people want to get along with each other?
Absolutely, but when you don't see it coming, and all of a sudden some false rumor or some relationship is infected with something that creates doubt or suspicion, if people don't understand where it came from, that conflict seems to grow and the rumor seems to spread, and before people know what hit them, there's a very intense negative atmosphere. In fact, in a community such as Iowa City, these kinds of activities don't confine themselves to the workplace or the hospital. And I could see if the scenario that you're laying out were to occur, that these bad feelings would spill over into the community itself, and there would be a lot of former friendships and family members who no longer chose to be involved with one another, and just some very nasty, tragic situations.
Well, Marty, you speak very effectively and knowledgeably about all this, and again, the title of the book is Confessions of a Union Buster from Your Past. Why should I really believe what you're saying? I mean, you were on the bad side for 20 years. You were busting unions for 20 years, and why should anybody watching this believe anything you're saying? You might be making money for MSA or whomever. I mean, I don't know who you are. You just show up in town.
Well, I can assure you I'm not making money from or for MSA. And I can assure you also that what I do today is not for the money. I haven't made in the 10 years that I have been presenting myself to unions and exposing this dirty business. I haven't made 20% of what I used to make in a year.
What happened to you? Why did you change, or whatever happened?
The whole process that I was involved in started to catch up with me, and I became a very self-destructive person. I stumbled into the world of alcoholism. I needed a way out, and yet the money I was making was so intoxicating, I couldn't find that opening.
And through Alcoholics Anonymous?
Through Alcoholics Anonymous and the 12-step program, I found my way out, and I found the opportunity and ability to make amends. And that is what I continue to do today. It's 10 years later, and anytime I'm involved with a labor organization, it's as much for me as it is for the people that I'm presenting to.
And I think, possibly people are somewhat cynical unless they've been through one of these 12-step programs. What would you say to the cynic who wouldn't believe that you, Marty, changed your life after going through a 12-step program?
Well, I think in short, because, I'm not really here to talk about recovery, but I came to learn to like myself and be happy with myself and a way of life that was comfortable to live.
Have you, in the past 10 years of speaking to unions and groups around the country about what union busters do, have you ever been threatened either by anybody whose life you ruined previously in your previous career, or have you been threatened by anybody whose livelihood you might be threatening now, a union buster? I mean, does anybody say just...
No, that there has never been an open threat. It wouldn't surprise me.
Have you ever been threatened with a lawsuit even?
No, I thought perhaps that might evolve out of the book, but the book was very meticulously scrutinized by the legal department of my publisher.
Don't they say truth is the best defense?
And that is why there have been no legal or otherwise attacks.
Mm-hmm.
And you asked me how I've survived for 10 years. When I talk to working people and unions and give them my opinion and give them the facts of how union busters operate, no matter how skeptical they may be of me, when they listen and then they apply what they've listened to and they see it work, then those doubts tend to diminish.
Mm-hmm. Well, I certainly appreciate you being with us here on Organizing for Partnership. And I think that your story, and I wish we had more time. I suppose everybody on TV says that, right? I wish we had more time. But in this case, I really do mean it, that I'm going to hold the book up one more time.
Thank you.
Because frankly, and I know you're not here promoting the book.
No, I'm really not.
Because this isn't a big ticket money-making book. I know that, and you know that.
That's right.
But it is available. I know at Prairie Lights you can order it, and other bookstores in the state of Iowa. You can order this book, Confessions of a Union Buster, by Marty Levitt with Terry Conroe. I want to throw in your collaborator, give her credit.
She deserves it, thank you.
And I found it a fascinating read, and I think it sheds a lot of light on not only union busting, but one man's quest throughout his life to try to reach some stage where he is comfortable with himself and he's doing the right thing. And again, Marty, I appreciate you being here. Thank you so
Gary.
much, and I hope you can come back to Iowa, and I hope next time it's after SEIU is signing a contract.
Likewise. Thank you very, very much.
All right. Bye now. And good night, folks. And that's why I would love to have somebody come on.